Morning, everyone. It's an absolute honour to be here. I think all of you last night participated in your own endurance event, some of you more than others. I think I'm actually surprised many of you are here today. I was expecting to be talking to a couple of dodgy cross-dressers and a few micro J Foxes, but thank you so much for actually turning up. I'm sure that a couple of you popped a few Nurofen, which was my strategy for getting through some of the pain that I endured when I was doing my sport. Here's a bit of an overview of what I wanted to talk about today. Firstly, to briefly describe what Ironman is. Then talk to you a little bit about how I went from a person that did absolutely zero sport to becoming four-time Ironman world champion. Then I thought I'd go through some of the strategies that I think I used and many people use to become a champion, and then finish off with what I see as my most important lesson of all. This was me as a child. This was the closest I ever got to being Wonder Woman, when my mum kindly dressed me up as the said superhero for a school fete. I didn't win. I was always a very, very driven, very, very self-motivated child. I channeled all of those characteristics into my academic studies. So what was really, really important to me was that I did well at school. So sport was something that I did very, very recreationally. I joined the local swimming club, but it was very, very much for the social scene. And I carried that philosophy all the way through to university. I did join the swimming club at university. I drank for them very, very successfully, but was less well known for my sporting prowess. And I think the coach was absolutely flabbergasted if I turned up for a session, and that was usually the sports night on a Wednesday evening. And that was really the extent of sport up to the age of 18. And then I retired altogether. I went traveling. Initially, I was only supposed to go traveling for 9 months and thereafter embark on a career as a lawyer. And I was traveling through Africa, and it was at that point that I met a very, very pivotal person. I think we all meet those people in our lives, someone that might change the direction that our life is going to take. And I was traveling through Africa, and I was questioning the wisdom of going into law and whether it was right for me. And her name was Jude. Jude said something very, very simple to me, but I'll never, ever forget it. And she said, Chrissie, look deep inside yourself and work out what your passion really is. And I have to admit, it sounds so simple, but I'd never really done it. And I looked deep inside myself, and I realized that my passion, ever since I was dressed up as Wonder Woman, wasn't to become a superhero, but was international development. Ever since I was a child, I had been passionate about international development. I can remember watching Blue Peter, watching the images of the Ethiopian famine that many of us can remember, crying, vowing to do something about it, arranging charity events, writing to Blue Peter, doing all kinds of things. So when I came back from traveling 2 years later, I decided not to embark on a career in law, but to do my MA in development economics and try and make my passion my career. And it was at that point, doing my master's, that I decided I would start running. I was traveling. I'd gotten kind of puffy in Australia, and I thought the best way to lose some of the puff was to start running. I had no clue about running other than that I went bright red and got really embarrassed about going bright red, and so ran really early in the morning to try and negate some of those embarrassing issues. So I started 20 minutes, 30 minutes, 40 minutes, 50 minutes, being slightly obsessive compulsive in nature. This soon increased. Then I had a brainwave. I think many of us have grown up watching the London Marathon on television. I thought to myself, oh, I've started running. I can run, maybe 90 minutes now. I'll enter the London Marathon. So I did that. I got a charity place. I ran the London Marathon in 2002. I had absolutely no clue about run training, other than I went out and ran same pace, same time each day. Much to my surprise, the London Marathon 2002 went really, really well, and I managed to do 3:08, which for me was totally inconceivable at the outset. I could never have imagined that I could run that time. And that really drove me on to take running more seriously. I joined a running club. I moved down to London. I started my career as a policy advisor on international development, working for the government. Fast forward to 2004, and I met another person that's, again, going to change the direction that my life is going to take. And he said something incredibly profound to me, and I know a number of you in the audience have also met a person like this, and he said to me, "Chrissie, you should do a triathlon." And my response was, "I can't ride a bike." "No problem, Chrissie, don't worry. We'll get you a bike." So I got myself a third-hand bike and set about learning how to ride it, how to brake. I'm still not very good at that. I keep coming off. But I did my first triathlon in 2004. It was a super sprint. I knew absolutely nothing about triathlon, but I loved every single minute of it. And at that time, I decided I was going to take a sabbatical from my job working for the government, and I went to live and work in Nepal. And in Nepal, I was managing water and sanitation projects. And here's just an example of some of the work that I was doing out there, the water resources that many people have to contend with there, and then some of the water systems that we put in to help try and alleviate them of the really abject poverty that they suffer. When I wasn't managing said projects, I was biking. Day after I arrived, I bought myself a mountain bike, and as I do with many of my bikes, all of my bikes actually, I name them. This bike is called, because it got stolen, this bike is called Prem, which is Nepali for boyfriend. So as you can imagine, I spent a considerable amount of time with Prem every single morning, weekends, and when we had Nepali holidays, of which there are many, we went on longer adventures, and this is one of our adventures. We went to Lhasa, capital of Tibet, decided to cycle the 1,400 kilometers over the Himalayas back to Kathmandu via Everest Base Camp. It was the most phenomenal experience I've ever had. And whilst the effects of altitude dissipate after 2 weeks, I think the mental strength I gained from participating in an endurance activity in those kind of altitudes and with those kind of conditions, snowstorms and sandstorms and on that type of terrain, I think that strength stays with me now and has shaped me into the athlete that I am today. 2006, I come back to the UK, and I think to myself, right, I'm going to give triathlon a good go. I was back working for the government, and I enter my first race, the Reckitt Super Sprint. One of the most important pieces of advice I give to novice triathletes is never use new equipment the day of a race. I didn't have a wetsuit. I borrowed one the day before the race from my friend. So my friend lends me this wetsuit. I try it on. I think, yeah, this fits absolutely perfectly. The morning of the race, in the not-so-tropical waters of Reckitt Lake, I must have lost about 20 pounds overnight, because I jump in the water and all this not-so-tropical water floods into the wetsuit, and bang, the gun goes off, and all the other swimmers kind of disappear into the distance, and I'm left floundering, and swimming is my strongest discipline, floundering on the start line, unable to swim, and had to be rescued by a kayaker, and was dragged to the side. That was my first race of 2006. But I didn't let it deter me, and my next race went much better. I managed to qualify for the World Amateur Championships. So we have elite championships, and we have the amateur championships. So at that stage, I was racing very much as an amateur. I qualified for the World Amateur Championships. I got myself a coach. I trained very, very hard. I went to the World Amateur Championships in Switzerland. Never in a million years, as with the marathon a few years previously, did I expect to do well. Never in a million years did I expect to win that race. And that's, much to my surprise, what happened. And I was crowned World Amateur Champion. And at that point, I had a huge decision to make. I was aged 29. And my decision was whether or not to give up my job, a job I loved and a job I was so passionate about, to become a professional triathlete. And I was scared. I was scared of the unknown. I was scared of failure. I knew nothing about professional sport. I didn't know much about the sport that I'd actually chosen. And I think we're all put in that position at some points in our lives. And, you know, we're scared of failure. We're scared of the unknown. We're scared of what we might look like in Lycra. And we can either let that stop us, or we can face those fears, and we can say, to hell with it. I don't know what the outcome is going to be, but I'm going to try. And the biggest failure of all is not to try. So age 30, I gave up my job, and which is practically retirement age for many professional athletes, gave up my job and became a professional triathlete. And I did so with the intention of being an Olympic distance athlete. So that's a shorter course athlete. Never doing an Ironman, which is 2.4 mile swim, 112-mile bike, and a marathon. That was something that stupid, crazy people did, and not me. That wasn't until my coach said to me, Chrissie, do you want to do an Ironman? And all I said to him was, am I ready? He said yes, and 5 weeks later, I'm on the start line of my first Ironman career. I never expected to win that race, and that's precisely what happened. And that gave me the qualification for the biggest race on our sporting calendar, which is the World Ironman Championships, as you saw in the video, in Hawaii. Bit better than Redditch, to be fair. Water's a lot warmer. Mai Tais are quite good too. I had 6 weeks to prepare myself for the biggest race of my life. I never went into that race ever expecting to win. My measure of success was to try and come in the top 10. To win the World Championships, to be crowned World Ironman Champion was something that happens to other people and not to me. And that's precisely what happened. And in 2007, I became World Ironman Champion for the first time. And since then, managed to win that race 3 more times. So now I've been crowned 4-time Ironman World Champion. And I have to say, I pinch myself each and every day to realize that I have achieved that honor. It really feels so incredibly surreal to me. But I'm often asked, Chrissie, what does it take to become a champion? And my personal view is you don't become a champion. A champion is not something that you become. I believe you act like one. You act like a champion day in, day out. A champion is someone that adopts certain behaviors and uses certain strategies. And I just wanted to go through what some of those strategies are. The first one, you gotta have a goal. Close your eyes and think of your goal. Everyone has to have one. It's got to be something that excites you. It's got to be something that inspires you, and you've got to aim high. Yeah, we can't all aim to run like Usain Bolt, but it's got to be ambitious, yet realistic. And you've got to document that goal. I have mine stuck on sticky notes everywhere, and you tell people, you make yourself accountable, you put it on social media. So have a goal and document it, and don't fail to try. Secondly, you've got to commit to excel at that. Success is a total decision, it's not a gift. You can make the decision to be mediocre, or you can make the decision to excel. So you've got to take what I call pride, personal responsibility in delivering excellence. You've got to be the best, the very, very best that you can be at whatever you are doing. And for me, that could have been academia, it can be when I'm walking the dog, it can be when I'm washing up, or it can be when I'm doing triathlon. But you have to make that decision to excel. Thirdly, I knew nothing, like I said, about triathlon when I first started. I had to amass a huge amount of knowledge. I didn't know about my competitors. I had to research them. I didn't know their strengths and weaknesses. I had to find that out. I didn't know about sports nutrition. I had to read about it, and I had to find out or find someone that did. Knowledge for me was huge power, and I had to have that knowledge in order to be able to develop my training program. And I'm often asked about my training program and what it takes to do an Ironman. For me, my training program comprised swim, bike, and run, carefully balanced between all three. All three are so interconnected. There's no point being an amazing swimmer if you're walking the second half of the marathon. So you need to be consistent across all three disciplines. So my program was carefully balanced between swim, bike, and run, focused not only on my strengths, but also on my weaknesses. And people often ask, how many hours a day did I train? And my answer to them was, I trained 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Every single aspect of my life was tailored towards, was dictated by the need to achieve my goal. So it wasn't just about swim, bike, and run. I left no stone unturned. It was about strength and conditioning. It was about nutrition. It was about rest and recovery. It was about massage. It was about physiotherapy. It was every single aspect of training my body to be the best it could be and getting that extra 1% and going that extra mile. And for me, going that extra mile meant taking huge, huge risks sometimes. And I think it's easy when you're at the top to rest on your laurels and just be content with the status quo. But I think in order to be able to progress and in order to be able to improve, I had to be prepared to innovate. I had to be prepared to adapt, and I had to be prepared to change, whether that's training venue, training program, changing my coach, as I did a couple of times. I needed to be prepared to take the risk. And not just in triathlon, but in life in general. If I'd never taken the risk in becoming a professional athlete, I would not be standing up here. I couldn't do that without the help of my team. And people often think of triathlon as a very, very individual sport. We're out there racing for some 8 hours, some 17 hours alone. And we cross the finish line, and the success and the accolades are ours. But I could never, ever get to that finish line without the support of my amazing, amazing team. And that was really, really hard for me. I'm a fiercely independent person. And initially, for me, it was almost a sign of weakness to have to lean on others, to rely on others, to ask others for help. But I soon came to the realization that I was stronger with them than than without. So my team comprised my family, my sponsors, and even my competitors. And this, what I wanted this picture to show, in part, was the great camaraderie that we have as competitors in the triathlon fraternity. I'm not sure whether all your competitors are going to give you the push that Leander did for me. As at that point, I was overtaking her to go into the lead of the race, the last World Championships in Kona. But from my schoolgirl Latin, I know that competitor means seek together. And it's women like Leander that enabled me to raise the bar, enabled me to raise my own performance to higher levels. So I even see my competitors as being part of my wider team. Lastly, given that we're kind of in a sci-fi theme, I probably should have used a Back to the Future theme, but the Trekkies amongst you will recognize this. My dad's a Star Trek aficionado, and he tells me that ad astra per aspera means to the stars through difficulty. And that couldn't be more true. It hasn't always been plain sailing. And I believe very, very much that I've been shaped as much by the adversity that I've faced and by the mistakes that I've made as much as my successes. You know, I've been injured countless times. I've crashed my bike. I've catapulted over barriers. I didn't start the World Championships in 2010 because I got sick. But I really, truly believe that it's those failures, those mistakes, that adversity that makes me stronger. Because I use that adversity when the going gets really tough. This was me 2 weeks before the World Championships in 2011. I didn't even think that I was going to be able to start the race, let alone finish it. I have this inability to defy gravity sometimes on my bike, and I was taking a corner 2 weeks before the race out on a ride, and body hit tarmac, and I left half my left side out in Colorado, and I bruised all of my hip and my ankle. It really wasn't that pretty. So I spent much of the 2 weeks before the race in hospital, and like I said, I didn't even know whether I could start the race. And not only was I physically compromised, but I was also mentally riddled with self-doubt. And as an athlete, that is something you simply don't want. Ironman is as much a mental game as it is a physical game. So I reevaluated my objectives, and instead of thinking that I was going to fight for the victory, I was just determined to do the very, very best with the body and mind that I had on the day and let the cards fall where they may. I didn't go into that race ever expecting to win. And that's what happened. And in all honesty, that was the best race I'd ever run. Not because of the time, and not because it was perfect, but because I think I overcame imperfections perfectly, and in that way, it was absolutely perfect. I had the race within myself that I'd always dreamed of, where I had to fight absolutely tooth and nail, and I crossed the finish line absolutely annihilated and unable to walk. And I had the fight with my competitors where I had to come back from 22 minutes down to win. And that was a fight I hadn't really had before. So in that way, I think that it was the best race I'd ever won, and I think my proudest moment as an athlete. I just wanted to finish off, like I said, by sharing with you the most important lesson that I've learned of all. And that is that our limits, my limits, your limits, are not where you think they are. And I just wanted to use this picture to illustrate that. This is Josh. And the first thing that Josh said to me when I met him was, Chrissie, do you want to do a run race? And to Josh, there was no limit to what he could achieve. He didn't care that I was a world champion, and he definitely didn't care that he didn't have any legs. He just proceeded to beat me over a 100-meter run along the beach. But just ask yourself, when did you start to place limits on what you think you could achieve? Because we all do it. It's the central governor inside of us, and central governor is really, really conservative, and it puts a stop to us long before the body is actually ready. And I believe you can stick your finger up to that central governor and you can say, to hell with it, to hell with the unknown, to hell with fear, to hell with adversity, I am going to try. And I think I've definitely been guilty of placing limits on what I think I can achieve. I said I could never do a marathon, and I go and do, and I could never do a triathlon, and I managed to finish one. I definitely couldn't break the world record. No, that's something happens to other people, and I could never be crowned world Ironman champion. But yeah, I defied my own limits of what I thought was possible. And that has been the most empowering and enlightening thing of all, that I've constantly defied my own expectation of what's possible. I've constantly redefined the limits of what I think I can achieve. So if I was just to leave you with one thing, that's to not be constrained by limits, to dream big, to dream really big, and know that you're capable of so much more than you think you are. Thank you.